This is a story of how a community came together to remove a dam and restore salmon to their native spawning grounds. It was called the Hemphill Dam, located on Auburn Ravine Creek just east of Lincoln, California. The creek is home to an annual migration of Chinook salmon. Each fall they swim from the Pacific Ocean up the Sacramento River and enter the creek to spawn. But for decades they had been blocked from their prime spawning habitat by the dam. In 2010, a community-wide effort was launched to remove the dam and save the salmon. It turned into a 12-year saga of public protests, studies, delays, reform elections, and court cases that finally ended in the fish passage. There are a lot of dams being demolished these days. The biggest removals, like the Klamath dams, make national headlines. What makes Hemphill different is that it is not a top-down, government-driven project on a big river with a big budget. It's a small dam on a small creek, and it's being removed by a grassroots effort working from the ground up. It's the kind of project any community could pull off. Take a look at Auburn Ravine Creek. Located northeast of Sacramento, it's about 33 miles in length from its headwaters in Auburn down to its mouth at the Sacramento River. It's a multi-use waterway, providing flood control, supporting fish, providing water for civic use and industrial use, and acting as a conveyance to move water from the Sierra Nevada to the agricultural users in the Sacramento Valley. Several improvements have been made over the years. The seasonal diversion dams are removed during the fall migration period. Screens have been installed at Pleasant Grove Canal to keep ocean-bound juveniles from being swept into farmers' fields. A fish passage in Lincoln opened up a mile of new spawning grounds. And finally, Hemphill Dam itself was removed, and the salmon can now access 6 more miles of prime spawning habitat. In 10 years, their habitat went from 2 to 8 miles. When it was built in the early 1900s by Wallace Hemphill, the dam was a simple structure. It raised the water level enough to divert a flow into Hemphill Canal, which was originally a hand-dug ditch across a treeless plain. Wallace's father, Alex Hemphill, established the first bank in Lincoln at 5th and G Streets. The Hemphill Mansion still stands in McBean Park. Wallace Hemphill died, and in the economic turmoil of the Great Depression, ownership of his dam repeatedly changed hands and was caught up in the Fauché scandal. When the dust settled, it ended up as a possession of the Nevada Irrigation District, NID, in 1933. NID patched the aging structure, laying steel mesh over Hemphill's original concrete and covering it all with gunite. Still, it continued to deteriorate. Each spring, the district installed wooden flashboards, which raised the water level high enough to flow into the canal. But Hemphill Dam had a dark side. The salmon couldn't swim past it to reach their native spawning grounds. Auburn Ravine salmon have a unique life cycle. They begin life as eggs deposited in the fall, hatching into juveniles in early spring. The juveniles begin a journey downstream to the ocean, where they spend 3 to 5 years before returning as adults to deposit and fertilize eggs. Their saga complete, they die in the stream. Unfortunately, the range of California salmon was drastically reduced as many dams were built beginning in 1894. Meanwhile, the water delivery system in Placer County evolved into what the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission called the most complex system in the United States. It's a spider web of old miners' ditches repurposed as irrigation canals, pipelines, diversion dams, drainages for water treatment plants, and conveyance conduits for water companies. In 2012, NID took the first step to restore the system by building a fish passage in Lincoln, opening up 2 miles of habitat.
NID believes this may be the first of maybe a couple of projects we're going to be involved in. When we first looked at this, the project kind of came up as a result of a discussion that Jack Sanchez and I had in the course of a watershed meeting. And Supervisor Wygant, I think, saw you here a second ago. There you are.
It's a great pleasure to be here today. It's just an example of some of the kinds of things we can do. So Ron, I want to thank you, thank Jim Bachman for support at the NID board. When I was a kid, when Jim was a kid, there were salmon in these creeks, the one that goes through our property every year, every fall. Working together, sometimes there's this perspective that you know, progress is at the expense of these kinds of things. But in fact,
things looked good as NID management looked forward to more progress, and 6 more miles could be added to the salmon spawning grounds. But things didn't proceed as quickly as Ron and Robert hoped. A new NID general manager, Rim Searchinger, stalled, delayed, and seemed intent on studying the issue to death. Meanwhile, the community rallied around the ravine. Supporters included agencies, foundations, corporate partners, community leaders, elected officials, and most importantly, volunteers. Kathleen Hedges explains what's going on.
Over the years, the community came together in many ways. For several years, the Wildlife Heritage Foundation has been managing a 65-acre wildlife preserve along Auburn Ravine in Lincoln. The Friends of Auburn Ravine worked with them to install bluebird nesting boxes in the preserve. Each week, since 2019, the Lincoln Adopt-A-Creek, led by Mana Bass, removes trash from the creek. Some of the trash washes down the creek from the foothills. Some is dropped by litter bugs. Some is from homeless campers. But thanks to the team's outreach to the campers, a large portion of that is pre-bagged by the homeless and set aside so the team can pick it up. The city then hauls the trash to the dump. The team collects about 30 tons of trash per year. Friends of Auburn Ravine has an ambitious agenda. Since 2016, Friends of Auburn Ravine, with help from the City of Lincoln, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Nevada Irrigation District, and California Fly Fishers Unlimited, installed a camera system that counts salmon swimming upstream to spawn in Auburn Ravine. The camera operates from mid-October through mid-March. Overhead lights allow video 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the white panels on the stream bed provide contrast to spot the salmon. The cameras have identified an annual average of 127 fall-run Chinook salmon. Some seasons there have been over 300. Most salmon are 30 to 36 inches long. Hewlett-Packard Enterprises donates software development expertise to speed the counting process. Sometimes the cameras see more than just fish, like this 4-foot-long river otter that caught a 3-foot-long salmon and was taking it home for dinner one night in 2021. There is also a portable underwater camera system that is being used to document a range of aquatic species, including juvenile salmon. In addition to the adult salmon that arrive every fall, the creek supports populations of rainbow trout, Sacramento pike minnow, and lamprey, all native species. Also, in 2016, Friends of Auburn Ravine started doing wading walking surveys of the creek. On many Saturdays during the fall and winter migration season, teams of volunteers go out to document the locations of live salmon and salmon nests. They collect tissue samples from the salmon that have died after spawning. In recent years, the State Water Resources Control Board has helped Friends of Auburn Ravine monitor bacteria levels in the creek. A few of the readings were a bit high, but all were okay for human contact. Irrigators and water districts are also helping. Seasonal dams west of Lincoln are removed every fall to let adult salmon swim upstream to spawn in Lincoln and beyond. Fish screens have been installed at 3 locations to help baby salmon from being swept away into irrigation canals. Screens still need to be installed at 6 locations. What motivates these volunteers? There seems to be a sense of wonder and awe as the salmon seem to draw us into their world. Again and again, we've heard our volunteers' excited reports of the first time they witnessed a salmon Between rainstorms, it can be shallow in places, but the salmon, almost 4 feet long, press on upstream. Half out of the water, they churn their way upstream. It is an ancient behavior that has been repeated for eons until dams blocked them. All we need to do is get out of their way. The salmon will do the rest.
Well, you know, success is an ongoing thing, right? Because you never actually get to success. You just got to kind of keep on trying. Kind of like the salmon, they just keep on trying. And if we can give them half a chance, you know, they will thrive, and we probably will too. One thing that a lot of folks talk about is that salmon are an indicator species. If the salmon are healthy in the creek, it probably means the creek is healthy. It probably means the
While community leaders, elected officials, agencies, and volunteers work together, activists demand immediate action. A lot of people campaign to remove Hemphill Dam, but the man who personifies the term local activist is Jack Sanchez. Born in 1939 in a cabin on the banks of Auburn Ravine, he has railed all his life against the establishment in a relentless fight on behalf of environmental issues, including restoring salmon and steelhead to the stream he calls home. He even led his group, Save Auburn Ravine Salmon and Steelhead, or SARSUS, on a protest march at Hemphill Dam. He is a fierce voice on behalf of the environment, and he is not shy about it.
Thoreau defined in great detail. Allowing this plan to proceed is making the people of California agents of injustice. We owe it to ourselves and our heirs to block the madness known as the Bay Area Delta Plan. We have a duty to avoid allowing such acquiescence to enable the government to make us agents of injustice. We must go to any extreme, take any action, resist all government bullying, do whatever is necessary to kill the Bay Area Delta Conservation Plan. Thank you.
We interviewed Sanchez, a former English teacher, at his birthplace, a tiny gold rush settlement on the ravine. 175 years ago, enthusiastic miners named it Ophir, the city of gold.
The world is shaped by madmen. You know, I admire madmen more than probably most people do. Was David Brower, and David Brower was the most enigmatic and effective leader of the Sierra Club in its history. I can remember Brower would just go talk to his enemies and walk in and just throw out his chin and try to start a dialogue with the people that he was trying to get to, who wanted to kill him, literally. Just blow the dam up. But you know, that's insane because people use this water. SARSUS doesn't want to remove anything that exists on the Auburn Ravine. All we want is fish passage, and we tell people that. You want a dam, you leave your dam there. Let's just get a fish ladder over the dam. So we're not monkey wrench gang people, although we admire them.
No one is closer to the land than Native Americans. Local tribes have flourished on the banks of the creek since time immemorial. Brian Wallace explains what this means.
My name's Albert Brian Wallace Yepamni, which would the way I would introduce myself as a Nisenan man, which is where we're sitting right now. This particular drainage and creek is very central to our culture and our life, ways, and history. And sitting here right now, it would be not too hard to imagine what it was like, you know, many generations ago. A morning like this, you would probably hear the cries of a newborn baby in a Nisenan lodge. And you would look over here and see gigantic acorn granaries and a nice village and many people walking around enjoying these habitats and this beautiful creek full of salmon and all kinds of medicine plants and everything that sustains our people. It can be found right here. I can close my eyes and in our language we'd say Gumanseyu Seupenti, which means Gumanseyu is where this water comes from, and it's the Bear River watershed where this beautiful water comes from that sustains this area. And Seupenti means can you hear the river sing? So it would be very easy for me to close my eyes and I can hear these generations of this land, speaking to my soul. The dam wasn't necessarily an idea of the indigenous people of this watershed, so anything that helps, promote unimpaired flows in the ravine to sustain its ecology is something that we need to celebrate and recognize and give people credit for doing. But it may be an incremental step, but you gotta think strategically and look at the long view. And for Native peoples or Nisenan peoples in particular, patience is truly a resource that we have come to rely on that's helped sustain us and help us survive. So,
this stream, the fish, the habitat, and the fact that there's thousands of homes being built right all around us. Are those irreconcilable conditions?
They could be irreconcilable conditions, and certainly there are hardships to make this work successful. Back to, again, which story are we going to look at? Which one are we going to embrace? The one that sustains us, that's about living environments and admitting our interdependence with the rest of the living world, or a story which is built on a myth of unsustainable economic growth and power. And those are the choices that rest before us today, and really that's the intersection of time we're in. And I think yes, the right upstream from this beautiful spot is a tremendous amount of development that is going to have a dramatic impact on this, and maybe even in a way, this nice, beautiful little place is almost seen as somewhat of an amenity to those developments rather than the other way around. That type of development should look more clearly to kind of fitting into this environment and what it's adding to the values of these resources and these cultures, and not just Nisenan culture, but the cultures that we share today. We're not the only ones that come to love these places and want to sustain them for the future generations. And you can't help but understand that the salmon is us and we are the salmon, and their story is ours.
People like Sanchez and Wallace add an impassioned voice to the discussion, but elected officials are the decision makers who can make things happen. We were lucky to have officials like Laura Peters, who, like Wallace, takes the long view of environmental progress. Peters was elected to the NID Board of Directors in 2019 as one of a slate of reform candidates.
I think that it is key that there are so many stakeholders that are interested in seeing this project succeed. The reason it is so successful is because there's so many stakeholders interested in it. It needed to get a critical mass before something could happen. It seemed as though this was always just considered, since the European settlement, this was just a conveyance for anthropogenic uses, whereas prior to that it was a very thriving environment. And so when people can appreciate that, and different agencies and different stakeholders and different NGOs all come together, it provided the momentum to. I think that the district was most concerned about the regulatory repercussions of having fish in this ravine. Prior administration and prior management didn't have the same appreciation for the environment. They were still, I believe, from the empire era or the extraction era, that the nature and the environment is solely to provide resources for human consumption and for human needs, and they never really thought that much about how critical the environment really is, because if we don't take care of the environment, we don't have the resources that they're extracting. And so I think that they just were worried that the regulatory impacts would be costly. And they've always been very focused on providing water at the very absolute lowest cost. It's been interesting because there are so many agencies and there are so many people that are willing to help, and you have to focus on the commonality among everybody. All people have different interests, and once you focus on the common interest, then you can start getting to the real collaboration and getting things done, because people have to feel that they're getting something out of it. It's not just taking from them. And so that's one of the things I learned in my state career, is that we need to listen to people and find out what is important to everybody so we can make sure that we all are moving in the same direction.
A series of events finally broke loose the bureaucratic logjam. In 2015, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife notified NID that Hemphill violated the Fish and Game Code. The district kept the letter secret, but a Public Records Act request revealed it. The dam violates Fish and Game Code Section 5901. In 2018, a reform slate of new board members was elected. Then the senior management team in NID, including the general manager and chief engineer, left the agency. They were replaced by a new management team that took a fresh look at Hemphill. Meanwhile, the Nevada County Grand Jury opened an investigation into the previous practices of NID. The grand jury found that NID failed to follow election laws, placed itself in legal jeopardy, exhibited a disregard for the Brown Act, and demonstrated organizational dysfunction in the areas of trust and communications. Finally, Water Audit California filed a lawsuit to force NID to fix the dam. A settlement agreement was reached. A key requirement was that NID's Hemphill removal or retrofit does not cause fish entrainment or fish passage issues. Peters explains the role the lawsuit played.
So it came, the general manager and the engineering manager had left, and we had turned over the board. We had 3 new board members. And so although the lawsuit, I'm sure, kept the schedule more concise, I don't know that it was so key in making the project happen, because I was already fully behind the project and trying to get it promoted as much as I could. And so I think that it was helpful for the schedule.
Skeptics were finally convinced when the board approved an annual budget with a line item for the full cost of the Hemphill project. The project was put out to bid, a contractor was selected, and construction started in 2022. During his 20 years as a Placer County supervisor, Robert Wygant consistently supported salmon migration on Auburn Ravine. We saw him dedicating the fish passage at Lincoln in 2012. In 2023, we brought him back to the banks of the ravine where the new fish passage had finally replaced the Hemphill Dam.
It didn't seem to change in terms of the kind of growth that we're having now. And Lincoln, when I was in high school, was 3,200 people population. Now it's 50,000. And I honestly can't think of anybody when I was a kid who would have envisioned that kind of growth in Placer County. So it was not fish friendly. And in partnering with the Nevada Irrigation District, the county got some design money and created a design of what a retrofitted facility should look like there. And that was done about 10 years ago, completed about 10 years ago, and it just hugely increased the ability for salmon to come back up in the fall. And it was very successful, got a lot of attention from Cal Fish and Wildlife. They started doing more assessments. And then years later, 10 years later, it takes us to the Hemphill facility, which was a bigger restriction. But it's my understanding that the removal or the retrofitting of those 2 facilities which still provide for diversion from Auburn Ravine for irrigation water, but it now allows for much more friendly passage for fish coming back up to spawn and for the smolt to return to the ocean. That we've opened up about 8 miles of spawning habitat that were not very open to fish before these facilities happened. So the difference is that the Placer County Conservation Plan requires completing contractual relationships with the state and federal environmental regulatory agencies. So Environmental Protection Agency, Army Corps of Engineers, Federal Fish and Wildlife Service, same with the state. So their responsibility and authority includes issuing permits when local development occurs to offset the impact that that development has on habitat for the protection of water quality and species. And the law provides that that authority can be vested at the local level, but you have to negotiate that relationship. And it took 20 years and cost a lot of money and required developing a huge number of relationships and nurturing trust and communication and outreach and working with the community and other stakeholders. And so that's what we launched out to do back in 2000. That effort started, and it was completed on Earth Day 2 years ago. And it is the most comprehensive plan of its nature in the whole country. And in essence, in a simplified manner, what it means is that if any project, either by a developer or a road project by a city or a county or something along those lines, or this project, the Hemphill Dam, it requires that you get permits to make sure that the impact of the project protects the environment. And now, in partnering with the state and federal regulatory agencies, the county, in partnership with the city of Lincoln, are issuing those permits, but we are also held responsible for doing the conservation.
What are the lessons we learned, and how can they help others trying to remove a local dam? First, you must accept that there will be a long timeline. We thought Hemphill could be removed in a few months after we brought it to the attention of NID. In reality, it took 10 long years just to authorize and fund the project. NID then expected construction to be completed in less than 3 months. It seems illogical, but that's the way it is. 10 years to authorize a project and 3 months to build it. We also learned that agencies like CDFW were not impediments to progress, but were partners. While they were constrained by a labyrinth of rules, they consistently moved the project forward, although at a pace that was frustrating at times. That was when elected officials came in. When regulators want to move forward but can't, elected officials can enable them. There is an analogy that activists must decide whether they want to be outside the tent or inside the tent. If you are outside the tent, you can observe and criticize, and you aren't constrained by the rules. If you're inside, you become part of the process and can influence it, but you must follow the rules. The reality is, you need to be both, inside and outside. There are dozens of small creeks like Auburn Ravine in California. If salmon runs are restored to them, it could do much to rescue the species from its current descent to extinction. We hope that if one of these is in your community, our example can inspire you.
I just wanted to add that if you take the time to close your eyes and listen to this, you can hear the river, the water speak to you, and they speak to your soul and the generations that you carry, and just think of the things that sustain you that have meaning, and I think a lot of them are brought back to places like this, or maybe this is where you come to find who you really are. We say Sayapenti, can you hear the river sing? And I say that in Nisenan. And the reason we speak in our traditional language is I use Nisenan. I mean, I use English as a tool to survive for today, but we teach our children to speak Nisenan so they can survive forever. And these are the places where we learn and get those instructions. And when we come here, we connect with the instructions that are literally in our DNA that is given to us from these places. So this is home, and it feels so good to be here.